This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
So I'm just leaving the zone in front of the courthouse down here where all the unrest was last night. And I just have to say a couple of things. The media has been saying that these are largely peaceful protests. But look, if you've got 5,000 people down there, not all of them, even not most of them, will be involved in violence or rioting. But that doesn't make the protest peaceful. Because if you have, say, 1,000 out of 5,000, or even 500 or 300 out of 5,000 who are being violent, then it's not a protest anymore. It's a riot. And the federal agents that are charged with protecting federal property down there, look, you have to understand, these rioters last night were trying to set fire to that building. They're trying to burn down the 10-story tall federal courthouse. And so these guys have been charged with protecting the courthouse, keeping that from happening. And so they have to come out and they have to deal with these rioters. So even if it's just a couple hundred of them, they still have to deal with them. And they have to shoot pepper balls and CS gas in order to do that. Now these guys are being assaulted with all manner of weapons. And they might be field expedient weapons, but they're weapons none the same. They haven't been shot at with firearms, thank God, yet. But they certainly have been targeted with high-powered lasers that can blind a man. They've been targeted with frozen water bottles, glass bottles. They've had all kinds of stones and bricks and things thrown at them. They have to protect themselves and the other protesters, because imagine what happens if one of these jackasses decides that he's gonna bring a gun to this fight, and from the crowd of 5,000 quote-unquote mostly peaceful protesters decides to open fire on these federal agents and kill a bunch of them. What do they do then? They can't fire back with live ammo, and they won't. And so when they come out and there's 5,000 people there and even just 100 of them are being unruly, they have got to take whatever measures they are legally allowed to take in order to push those crowds back. They ask nicely and the crowds don't leave. Now what I saw last night was this. Those officers displayed great courage and great discipline, fire control discipline, when it came to dealing with the rioters. They did not throw tear gas, fire pepper balls, or throw flashbangs unless they were fired upon first. Meaning if you threw a bottle at them, then they threw a tear gas grenade back at you to get you out of the area. If you directed your high-powered green laser at them in an attempt to blind them, then they threw a flashbang to get you out of the area. They did not just willy-nilly gas peaceful protesters. They did not do that. That is not true when you hear that in the news. They are not gassing peaceful protesters. They're gassing rioters who are using the peaceful protesters as shields and as an excuse, and the media is running with it. And look, you need to learn to read between the lines in these stories. Don't believe what the media is telling you. If it sounds unreasonable, it probably is. So, after about 10 minutes of the protesters beating on the walls and begging these guys to come out, they came out. And they started shooting tear gas and flashbangs, which is push the group back. Basically, anytime somebody throws something at them, they throw something back. And they're pushing the group, or the protesters, out of the area. And obviously, people are very upset about that.
Media reports call these nightly protests mostly peaceful. And for most of the day here, hundreds and then thousands of people came to show their displeasure with police brutality and the presence of federal police forces in their city.
We as ordinary citizens really only have two powers to affect changes in our government. We have the power of the vote and we have the power of protest. The former's already being quashed through various duplicitous means, but sending the federal troops to this location, kidnapping people in unmarked vans with unmarked officers, is basically a terror tactic to try and suppress the free right to protest.
So you don't think that what do you think was the Trump administration's intent in sending federal officers here?
Personally, I believe it's a strongman show. I believe that Portland standing up and making a scene like this is a problem, and attempting to quash that scene in a very forceful way as a means to appeal to the conservative base, who is really the only thing propping our current president up. It is a strongman show, basically.
And so you think you're trying to make it basically have the opposite effect? Is that...
Yes, basically. I feel very defensive of the right of people to speak their mind and to protest. I think it's integral to the history and identity of this country, and seeing these tactics be used to try and repress it made me angry enough to find a way to get out here.
Do you draw a line between protesting and destroying the work of other men's hands? Or...
That's a complicated issue. As a white person, I really have no place to be trying to destroy anything, and if I were to see, say, another white person throwing rocks or bottles or things at federal property, I would probably try to stop them. I believe in peaceful protestation, not violent. But I can't speak for the African Americans out there. They have decades of resentment built up from their own peaceful protestations being ignored and not working. It is not my place as a white person to try to control the voice or the actions of our black community and tell them what they can and cannot do. So as much as I disagree with violence, and I don't think that rioting and destroying things is the way to go, it is not my position to tell this very much abused community what they can and cannot do, or what I think they should or should not do to make their voices heard. I am here to support them, not arbitrate.
I got it. Is there any line where you change your mind on that when they start, if they were, I'm not saying they will, I'm just saying if they were to start pulling people out of their cars and beating them to death with rocks, would you say that was wrong?
Obviously, I think any human being would find that unacceptable.
I would say so.
I think the vast majority of black Americans would find that unacceptable. That is not the way to go.
Without a doubt, yeah. I'm not saying that they would do that. I'm just saying that what you're expressing to me, and very well, by the way, you're very well spoken.
Thank you.
Is a sort of subjective morality, and that's, I get it. I understand what you're saying. That they get to kind of choose their own truth. Is that what you're saying?
Basically,
they get to choose what's true for them. Right?
I don't get to say what truth is correct or incorrect. I don't get to say what they're doing is okay or what they're doing is not okay. My point is that I'm not in any position to try to arbitrate to other people, and especially to black Americans, what form of protest is appropriate or acceptable.
Got it. Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to give you a voice in that. I mean, obviously you're devoted enough to come out here and stand here all night, but you got to respect that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's go home. Let's go home.
The crowd swelled after sundown, bringing another element with it. Black-clad Antifa members armed with baseball bats, high-powered lasers, and homemade shields gathered at the front of the federal building and started trying to break down boarded-up doors. Several minutes later, law enforcement officers from the U.S. Border Patrol's tactical team emerged and pushed the crowd away from the building. As the peaceful protesters quickly backed off, Antifa members in expensive gas masks began throwing bottles and trying to blind the agents with the powerful green lasers. In response, the agents fired tear gas and stun grenades.
A little bit of tear gas. That's exciting. Ooh, should have brought a mask. Oh yeah. Goggles, things like that.
Pitched battles continued into the early morning as rioters lobbed dangerous fireworks toward police leading to more crowd control measures. Whenever cops retreated into the building, protesters surged forward once again, at one point trying to set fire to the federal courthouse. President Trump announced Wednesday that he will deploy 100 federal agents to Chicago to help combat rising crime rates as he continues to position himself as the law and order president.
There's been a radical movement to defund, dismantle, and dissolve our police departments. Extreme politicians have joined this anti-police crusade and relentlessly vilified our law enforcement heroes. To look at it from any standpoint, the effort to shut down policing in their own communities has led to a shocking explosion of shootings, killings, murders, and heinous crimes of violence. This bloodshed must end. This bloodshed will end. Today I'm announcing a surge of federal law enforcement into American communities plagued by violent crime. We'll work every single day to restore public safety, protect our nation's children, and bring violent perpetrators to justice. We've been doing it, and you've been seeing what's happening all around the country. We've just started this process, and frankly, we have no choice but to get involved. This rampage of violence shocks the conscience of our nation, and we will not stand by and watch it happen. Can't do that. The citizens of Chicago are citizens of America, and they have the same right as every other American to live in safety, dignity, and peace. No mother should ever have to cradle her dead child in her arms simply because politicians refuse to do what is necessary to secure their neighborhood and to secure their city. Every American, no matter their income, their race, or their zip code, should be able to walk their city streets free from violence and free from fear.
In the meantime, here in Portland, the feds began installing barriers around the federal building to discourage continued attempts to destroy the building.